The first time I visited Disneyland, I was a child wrapped in the cocoon of parental warmth and the pure excitement of the possibilities that lay inside those magical gates. My memories were golden hued, with laughter echoing against the backdrop of playful Technicolor. It's a Small World was one of the first rides I ever experienced. I remember the boat gently bobbing along the water, the kaleidoscope of nations singing in unison, each doll meticulously crafted in traditional attire. Their wide, unblinking eyes and perpetual smiles struck me even then as oddly knowing, as if they shared a secret, a hidden understanding of something far beyond my child's mind. Years passed, the memory of that ride began to fade, overshadowed by the complexities of adulthood. However, a chance opportunity presented itself for me to revisit Disneyland, now with my own child in tow. It was supposed to be a day of nostalgia and bonding, a chance for me to weave my past experiences into new memories with my daughter. As we entered the park, I couldn't help but feel a thrill of anticipation mingled with nostalgia. Everything felt unchanged yet different, as if time had merely dusted the surfaces but retained the essence just for us. As luck would have it, my daughter, Sophie, was captivated by the concept of It's a Small World. Her eyes glimmered with the same enchantment I must have had at her age. We queued up, the line moving with the efficiency I had forgotten theme parks could have. The anticipation built as we approached the entrance, the tinkling music growing louder and more enveloping. I could feel the familiar warmth of childhood memories knocking softly at the corners of my mind. As the boat embarked, Sophie was all eyes and ears, her face a canvas of pure wonder. The ride was just as I remembered, vibrant, harmonious, with those same faces smiling from their boxed stages. Yet, an unsettling feeling crept over me, akin to deja vu but more profound, as if the sensations from my childhood visit were trying to echo through time. The dolls seemed different somehow, their eyes more knowing, their smiles slightly more crooked. This unease was amplified as we drifted past the European section. The dolls, dressed in their quaint costumes, appeared to shift ever so slightly. At first, I dismissed it as an illusion of the dim lighting and moving water, but the feeling of being observed lingered, as though we were not merely spectators, but part of their world, subject to their eternal gaze. The first real disturbance occurred when Sophie pointed to a Spanish dancer. "Look, Mommy, she's waving," she exclaimed, clapping her hands with delight. I turned to see a graceful figure seemingly frozen mid-flourish. I smiled at my daughter's imagination, but something caught my eye. The dancer's wrist twitched almost imperceptibly, her mechanical smile widening by a fraction. It could have been a trick of the light, I told myself, a mere mechanic hiccup. Still, the sensation of unease clung to me like a second skin. My eyes flitted around, trying to catch signs of malfunction or perhaps the hands of a clever ride operator playing tricks. But the dolls remained in their static animation, the boat gliding smoothly onward. As we progressed into the African section, the air felt thicker, not with heat, but with an intangible presence. Sophie's chatter continued, unfazed, but I found my attention divided, half immersed in our conversation, half absorbed by the unsettling vibrancy around us. This ride, meant for children and adults alike to embrace the unity and diversity of the world, had taken on a new guise. The dolls' eyes seemed to follow me, their heads turning ever so slightly as if to maintain their focus on us. The music, which had once seemed a jubilant harmony, now felt like a mechanical mantra, looping endlessly, hiding messages beyond comprehension in its repetitive cadence. The escalation of oddities continued, subtle yet undeniable. The Dutch girl, holding a pair of wooden shoes, seemed to blink, a slow, deliberate closing and opening of her eyes, as if acknowledging our shared secret. A Scottish bagpiper tilted his head in a motion far too smooth for an inanimate object, his smile broadening into something less innocent. Sophie, thankfully, remained blissfully unaware, her laughter and excitement undimmed by the nuances that pricked at my edges. She leaned over eagerly, hands reaching towards the dolls as if she could touch their world. I pulled her gently back into the boat, my heart quickening at the thought of her falling into the water or worse, reaching too close to the peculiar characters that seemed to harbor more than just mechanics. The climax arrived as we entered the final section of the ride, the grand finale of unity and global harmony. The dolls here, representing every nation, stood together in a chorus of color and sound. Their voices, layered and overlapping, should have been comforting, a reminder of the interconnectedness of humanity. But instead, it felt oppressive, as if the song was a siren, pulling us deeper into their world, a world where they were not mere dolls, but sentient beings bound by some ancient enchantment. In that moment, as the crescendo built, the boat began to slow to a stop. Sophie looked up at me with her bright eyes, unaware of the mounting tension. My heart was pounding, my mind a whirl of irrationality and dread. I tried to focus on the exit, to remind myself this was just a ride, a simple amusement for children. But then, with surreal clarity, the dolls moved. Not in the programmed, repetitive motions I had come to expect, but in fluid, human-like gestures. A Japanese geisha turned her head directly towards me, her eyes fixing on mine with a depth that was both terrifying and mesmerizing. Her lips parted, a small, serene smile forming, a gesture of understanding, of recognition. I tore my eyes away, clutching Sophie close, determined to shield her from whatever madness was unfolding. The boat jerked slightly, then resumed its course, gliding towards the exit as if nothing had happened. The music softened, the flashing lights dimming as we approached the unloading dock. The ride was over. We were back in the real world, the California sun shining brightly overhead, obliterating the shadows that had seemed so menacing just moments before. Sophie, unfazed, chatted happily about her favorite parts, her innocence a balm to my frayed nerves. I forced a smile, nodding along, yet the experience lingered like a shadow at the edge of my consciousness. As we exited the ride, I cast one final glance back at the entrance. The facade of It's a Small World stood as it always had, cheerful and inviting. But beneath that facade lay secrets I could not comprehend, mysteries that defied the logical explanations my adult mind demanded. It was a small world, indeed, a world with boundaries blurred between reality and imagination, where dolls could hold secrets in their painted eyes. The lingering fear followed me throughout the rest of the day, a quiet whisper at the back of my mind. Even as we enjoyed the other attractions, the memory of those knowing smiles and fluid movements haunted me. I couldn't shake the sensation that we had left something behind, or worse, that something had followed us out into the world. That night, as I tucked Sophie into bed, she asked me to tell her a story. I hesitated, unsure of which tales to weave. My mind flashed to the dolls, their faces vivid in the darkness of my thoughts. I opted for a fairy tale, safe and familiar, steering clear of any stories that might hint at the horrors lurking in the land of fantasy. But as I watched her drift to sleep, I couldn't help but wonder, what if the dolls were more than just figments of mechanical ingenuity? What if they were vessels of a forgotten magic, a hidden world existing parallel to ours, biding their time in the guise of innocence? It was a thought both terrifying and strangely comforting, the idea that the world held secrets beyond our understanding. In the quiet of the room, I listened to Sophie's gentle breathing, my own heart gradually settling into a calm rhythm. The day had been long, filled with wonder and fear, the lines between the two almost indistinguishable. I told myself to forget, to let go of the unsettling memories and embrace the mundane realities of life. Yet, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I knew it was a small world, one that had shown me a glimpse of something extraordinary. A world where dolls could watch and wait, their smiles hiding truth that danced just out of reach. And I knew that I would never look at them the same way again, their presence an ever-present whisper in the back of my mind. In the end, the park closed for the night, the lights dimming one by one, the music fading into silence. But somewhere, in the stillness of It's a Small World, the dolls stood vigilant, waiting for the next guests to enter their domain and join them in their eternal celebration, a celebration of the small world we all inhabit, one filled with secrets and magic lurking just beneath the surface. I always had a peculiar fascination with theme parks. There was something about the manufactured joy, the carefully curated experiences, the deliberate act of creating a haven of happiness that appealed to my imagination. Perhaps it was the juxtaposition of this happiness with my own reflective nature that fueled my curiosity. Disneyland was, of course, the epitome of such delights, and during a quiet afternoon, I found myself strolling through its sprawling paths, absorbing the vibrant tapestry of sensation. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long, golden streaks across the park, the shadows lengthening in synchrony with the laughter of children that filled the air. I wandered aimlessly, allowing the flow of the park to guide me, until I found myself drawn to a ride I had heard much about but never experienced. It's a Small World. The ride was housed in a building that looked like a gleaming castle, its facade adorned with clocks and moving parts, all painted in pastel hues. As I joined the queue, I felt a strange sense of anticipation. It reminded me of childhood memories, those fleeting moments when you believe that magic is real, just beyond reach. I boarded a small boat with a handful of other visitors, settling onto the wooden seat as the gentle current began to carry us into the heart of the attraction. The ride unfolded in a series of vignettes, each representing a different part of the world. Dolls dressed in colorful, traditional garb sang the ride's famous tune in an endless loop. Their cherubic faces and rhythmic motions were meant to charm, and I found myself lulled by the sheer innocence of it all. The melody was omnipresent, weaving through the air, a melody that, despite its simplicity, became deeply ingrained in my mind. It was during one of these moments of quiet contemplation that I noticed something strange. I was staring at a group of dolls representing the Scandinavian countries when one of them, a small figure in a blue dress with flaxen hair, seemed to turn its head slightly in my direction. I blinked, dismissing it as a trick of the light or an automatic feature of the ride. However, as we continued, I felt a tingling sensation as if being watched. It was absurd, I told myself, rationalizing that the ride was designed to make guests feel immersed and engaged. As the boat glided further into the attraction, the air grew cooler, and the lighting dimmed to simulate a starry night. The transition was seamless, yet I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. My eyes scanned the scene, landing on a group of dolls in the African section. Once again, I saw it, a fleeting motion, a head tilt, a blink. They seemed synchronized to the music, yet their movements now appeared slightly out of sync, as though they were influenced by something unseen. I turned to observe my fellow riders, curious if they noticed the same oddities. The couple ahead were engrossed in taking pictures, their faces lit by the glow of their phones, while a family behind me laughed as their children pointed out details in the scenery. No one seemed to share my apprehension. Perhaps it was just my imagination, I mused. After all, the atmosphere was designed to evoke wonder and delight. We drifted into the next section, an array of dolls representing Asia. The melody shifted subtly, incorporating the sounds of stringed instruments and chimes. The dolls here were dressed in opulently detailed costumes, their tiny hands moving with choreographed precision. I watched closely, the sensation of being observed now a persistent itch at the back of my mind. And then I saw her, a doll with almond-shaped eyes and a vibrant red robe. Her head turned slowly, deliberately, locking eyes with mine. Her lips curled into a smile, or was it a sneer? My breath caught in my throat, and I instinctively looked away, only to find another pair of eyes watching from across the water. As I scanned the room, it seemed more dolls had shifted their gaze, their eyes following us with an intensity that was unmistakably alive. Panic fluttered in my chest, but I restrained myself, telling my racing heart that it was impossible, absurd even, for inanimate objects to pose any threat. The darkness grew more pronounced as we entered the next chamber, the song now echoing eerily against the walls. This part of the ride showcased the Americas, a vibrant carnival of color and sound. Yet beneath the cheerful exterior, a heavy sense of dread settled over me. The dolls were more active here, their movements exaggerated, erratic. One doll, a small boy with a painted face, lifted his arm in a way that felt more like a beckoning gesture. Others seemed to lean closer as we passed, their smiles widening unnaturally. I could no longer deny what I was seeing. What should have been benign dolls were behaving with a life of their own. My mind spun with disbelief, trying to rationalize the impossible. Had the creators designed the ride with such realism, or had my senses taken me on a path beyond understanding? The boat floated into a vast room, the finale of the ride, a dazzling display of unity, where dolls of every nation sang in unison. Yet the harmony I had expected was marred by a cacophony. The dolls were no longer content in their stillness. They swayed and shifted, their eyes glinting in the dim light, their voices rising in a discordant symphony that clashed with the familiar tune. I felt trapped, the boat moving at its leisurely pace, indifferent to my growing terror. The other passengers remained blissfully unaware, or were they simply pretending not to notice? My heart pounded loudly in my ears, each beat a reminder of the reality I had to face. I had to maintain composure, keep rationality in check. But the ride's end seemed agonizingly distant. With what felt like an eternity, the boat finally rounded the last corner, the exit in sight. The doll's song lingered, an oppressive chorus that threatened to follow me into the waking world. As we disembarked, I stumbled onto the platform, inhaling deeply, grateful for the return to reality. The dolls remained behind, their gazes fixed even as the boat carried the next group of unsuspecting guests into their domain. Outside, the sun had begun its descent, casting the park in the warm glow of twilight. Laughter and music filled the air, a stark contrast to the unsettling experience I had just undergone. Yet, as I walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed within me, a sense of having glimpsed a secret world lurking just beneath the surface. For days, the ride haunted my thoughts. The melody played on loop in my mind, an insidious echo that refused to be silenced. At night, I would awaken to the sound of faint singing, the voices whispering from the shadows. In mirrors, I caught the reflection of eyes that weren't my own, staring back with a knowing gleam. I avoided discussing it with friends, fearing skepticism or ridicule. Yet, deep down, I knew I wasn't alone. Others must have experienced it, I reasoned, but perhaps they too were bound by an unspoken pact of silence. The dolls, with their painted smiles and hollow eyes, held a power that defied explanation. Life continued, the routines of daily existence providing a semblance of normalcy. But in quiet moments, the truth lingered, like a shadow stretching beyond the confines of the imagination. It's a small world, indeed, and within it, mysteries abound, hidden in plain sight, waiting for curious souls to uncover them. As time passed, the experience became a memory, albeit one that never fully faded. The park's allure called to me still, a siren song of joy and wonder tinged with the faintest whisper of fear. Would I venture back to that ride? Perhaps. But next time, I'd be prepared, armed with the knowledge that the world is never as small as it seems, and within its boundaries dwell secrets that defy the very fabric of reality. Theme parks have always carried a certain charm for me, a nostalgic pull to simpler times when life was all about joy and discovery. Among these parks, none could quite capture that essence like Disneyland. The air thick with the scent of popcorn and spun sugar, the distant laughter of children, the whimsical sounds of the park's attractions, all creating a kind of magic that made one feel both young and old at the same time. I visited often, drawn by the way the park seemed to exist in a pocket of reality where time flowed differently, where the mundane worries of life seemed to dissolve into the ether. On one particular visit, I found myself drawn to the It's a Small World ride, a classic staple of Disneyland. Its gleaming white facade shimmered in the sunlight, a promise of innocence and delight. I had ridden it countless times, lulled by its repetitive song and the vibrant dioramas that depicted children from around the globe. Yet, on that day, it felt different, tinged with a subtle, almost imperceptible unease that I couldn't quite place. Perhaps it was the way the light flickered strangely in the entrance tunnel, casting elongated shadows that seemed to dance independently of the ride's gentle sway. Or maybe it was the strange sensation that washed over me as I stepped into the small boat, a chill that crept into my bones despite the California sun blazing overhead. I disregarded the feeling, convincing myself it was merely a trick of the mind, a fleeting remnant of an overactive imagination. The ride began as it always did, with the familiar melody echoing in the air. The brightly colored dolls singing in their high-pitched, tinny voices. They swayed mechanically, their eyes large and inviting, a portrayal of innocence and unity. Yet, as we drifted from one room to the next, I couldn't shake the feeling that those eyes were following me, the painted smiles concealing secrets. It was somewhere in the African section that I noticed it first, a flicker of movement that didn't belong. One of the dolls, a small figure dressed in vibrant tribal attire, seemed to have turned its head slightly, its eyes locked onto mine. I blinked, certain that I was imagining things, but when I looked again, it was in the same position as before, motionless, smiling benignly. I laughed softly to myself, attributing it to a minor malfunction, a harmless quirk of the animatronics. But then it happened again. In the next room, an Asian doll, its features delicately painted, appeared to glance sideways, its head tilting ever so slightly as the boat glided past. My heart skipped a beat, a cold sweat breaking out on the back of my neck. I looked around, hoping to catch the amusement or confusion on other passengers' faces, but they seemed oblivious, absorbed in the ride's charm. Each subsequent room presented a new anomaly, a doll that moved just a fraction too fluidly, another whose eyes seemed to track my movements with uncanny precision. My grip on the boat's edge tightened, my breath shallow and quick. I tried to rationalize it, to convince myself it was a series of coincidences, a malfunctioning mechanism, anything but what my instincts whispered to me. As we approached the final room, the unease had grown into a palpable fear, a thrumming tension that coiled in my stomach. The large, colorful finale, usually filled with singing dolls from every corner of the world, now seemed to loom ominously, their voices a discordant cacophony that grated on my nerves. I scanned the room, my heart pounding, desperate to find an anchor in the surreal chaos. And then I saw it. A doll, larger than the rest, positioned prominently at the center. Its eyes were different, not painted, but glassy, reflecting the dim light in a way that seemed almost sentient. It wasn't just a machine designed to mimic life. It was watching me, aware, its smile too wide, too knowing. Time seemed to slow as the boat drifted closer, my senses heightened as though every nerve was on high alert. The melody, once a simple tune, now felt oppressive, the words twisting into something darker, more insidious. The other dolls, too, seemed to have ceased their programmed motions, their eyes all converging on me, as if in anticipation. In that moment, I was acutely aware of the wrongness of it all, the way the air felt thick, stifling, the oppressive weight of unseen eyes observing, waiting. I willed myself to look away, to break the spell, to ignore the irrational fear that threatened to consume me. As the ride came to an end and the boat emerged into the sunlight once more, a profound sense of relief washed over me. The normalcy of the outside world a balm to my frayed nerves. I stumbled out, my legs shaky, my mind racing to make sense of what I'd experienced. The laughter of children, the bright sights and sounds of the park, all felt distant, surreal, as though I had crossed a threshold into another realm and returned, forever altered. I tried to shake it off, to lose myself in the throngs of park goers, to dismiss the experience as a bizarre figment of my imagination. Yet, no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't escape the feeling that something had changed, that I had glimpsed a world beneath the surface, one that most were blissfully unaware of. Days passed, and life returned to its routine rhythm, yet the shadows of that day lingered, an unshakable presence that haunted my thoughts. I found myself drawn, again and again, to the memories of that ride, replaying each unsettling movement, each whispered hint of something greater lurking beneath the surface. It was during a sleepless night, the quiet hum of the city outside my window, that I felt the first stirrings of an idea, outlandish and terrifying. What if those dolls, those seemingly innocuous figures, were more than mere machines? What if they were conduits, vessels for something ancient and malevolent, using their innocent facades to observe, to learn, to wait? The thought took root, growing into an obsession, an insidious presence that gnawed at the edges of my mind. I began to research, to delve into the history of the ride, the stories and myths that surrounded it. I uncovered whispers of incidents, strange occurrences, inexplicable phenomena that had been dismissed as technical glitches or overactive imaginations. The deeper I dug, the more convinced I became that there was truth to my fears, that the ride was more than a simple attraction. It was a portal, a gateway to a world beyond our understanding, one where the line between life and artifice blurred, where the boundary between observer and observed shattered. My days were consumed by this quest for understanding, my nights plagued by dreams of painted eyes and mechanical smiles, watching, always watching. I became a shadow of myself, my thoughts fractured, my mind caught in a loop of fear and fascination. Friends and family expressed concern, their voices a distant echo that I struggled to connect with. I was trapped in a world of my own making, a prisoner of my own fear, yet I couldn't stop, couldn't turn away from the truth I so desperately sought. In the end, it was the lingering fear that remained, the knowledge that I had glimpsed something beyond comprehension, that the dolls were but the surface of a vast and unfathomable mystery. I lived in the shadow of that day, marked forever by the terror that lurked behind plastic smiles and painted eyes. Even now, as I write these words, I feel their presence, a whisper in the dark, a reminder that the world is not as simple as it seems. The ride continues, its song echoing through the corridors of the park, a siren call that lures countless souls to its embrace. But I know the truth. It's a small world, after all, and within it, horrors await those who dare to look beyond the veil, to see the darkness that hides within the light. The day began like any other, imbued with the usual hustle and bustle that define our family trips to Disney World. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a golden hue over the sprawling theme park. Our excitement was palpable, a shared enthusiasm that bound my wife, our two children, and me into a collective unit of anticipation for what lay ahead. We had meticulously planned this vacation, a much needed respite from the monotony of daily life, and the children were particularly eager to explore the wonders of the Magic Kingdom. As we meandered through the park, weaving between crowds of equally eager families, the sights and sounds of Disney enveloped us. Laughter and music formed a symphony of joy that was nearly infectious, and we found ourselves caught in its rhythm. Our first destination of the day was It's a Small World, a ride I remembered fondly from my own childhood. I recalled the charming innocence of the animatronic dolls, their cheerful song that promised unity and peace across the globe, and the soothing boat ride that transported you through a kaleidoscope of cultures. It seemed like a perfect way to start our adventure. We approached the ride, the facade of the building a whimsical representation of the world, punctuated by vibrant colors and the iconic clock tower. A line had already formed, but it moved briskly, giving us little time to absorb the details. Before long, we were seated in one of the boats, my daughter's eyes wide with wonder, my son bouncing on his seat in anticipation. The boat glided forward, and the familiar song began to play, its repetitive melody both nostalgic and comforting. As we entered the first room, the dolls sprang to life, a myriad of costumes and colors reflecting the diversity of the world. Children from Europe, Asia, Africa, and beyond danced and sang in harmony, their mechanical movements precise and synchronized. It was exactly as I remembered it, and I found myself relaxing, allowing the ride to transport me back to a simpler time. We drifted through the different scenes, each more captivating than the last. My children were entranced, pointing and exclaiming at the various displays, their joy infectious. It was a reminder of the innocence of childhood, a time when the world seemed vast and full of endless possibilities. I watched them, my heart swelling with happiness, until something peculiar caught my attention. It was subtle at first, a flicker of movement that seemed out of sync with the rest. I watched as one of the dolls, a charming little figure in Dutch attire, appeared to turn its head ever so slightly, its eyes following our boat. At first, I dismissed it as a trick of the light or an illusion caused by the boat's movement. Animatronics, after all, were designed to mimic life, to create the illusion of sentience. Yet, as we continued to drift through the ride, I began to notice more anomalies. A Japanese doll tilted its head with a slow, deliberate motion, its eyes meeting mine with an intensity that was unnerving. Further along, an African doll paused mid-dance, its wooden gaze fixed upon us. I felt a growing unease, a prickle of discomfort that was at odds with the cheerful surroundings. I glanced at my family, but they seemed oblivious to my growing apprehension. My wife was occupied with the children, pointing out various details and encouraging their enthusiasm. I didn't want to alarm them, didn't want to taint this cherished experience with my own misgivings. And so, I remained silent, convincing myself that it was all just an overactive imagination, an adult's inability to fully embrace the magic that children saw so effortlessly. As we neared the ride's conclusion, a final room filled with dolls from around the world holding hands in a united chorus. The melody swelled to a crescendo. The dolls, dressed in white, sang of peace and unity, their faces serene and content. It should have been a comforting sight, an uplifting end to the ride, but I felt a shiver run down my spine. Each doll's eyes seemed to bore into mine, their smiles frozen yet somehow knowing. Once we disembarked, I shook off the unease, attributing it to the dim lighting and my own overactive imagination. After all, it was just a ride. Harmless fun, designed to entertain and not to frighten. We spent the rest of the day exploring the park, indulging in its many attractions, though a part of me couldn't quite shake the feeling of being watched. As the day drew to a close and the sun dipped below the horizon, we returned to our hotel. The children were exhausted, their boundless energy finally depleted, and they fell asleep almost instantly. My wife too retired early, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I found myself replaying the events of the day, the niggling feeling of unease resurfacing with greater clarity now that the distractions of the day had faded. I tried to logically dissect what I'd seen, convinced that there was a rational explanation for it all. Animatronics, after all, were complex machines, subject to glitches and malfunctions. But even as I tried to reason with myself, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something I was missing, something I had overlooked. Determined to put my mind at ease, I decided to return to the park after dark. There was a certain thrill in sneaking out, the excitement of breaking rules tempered by the justification that I was merely pursuing peace of mind. Navigating through the park after hours was eerily surreal. The vibrant cacophony of the day had been replaced by silence and shadows, the once cheerful attractions looming ominously in the dark. I made my way back to It's a Small World, the facade now bathed in the pale glow of the moon. It was unsettling to see it devoid of the throngs of visitors, the stillness of the night amplifying my sense of unease. I approached the entrance, surprised to find it unlocked, as if inviting me in. The ride was eerily quiet, the usual music replaced by an oppressive silence. My footsteps echoed off the walls as I stepped inside, the familiar scenes now shrouded in darkness. Without the colorful lights and cheerful melody, the dolls seemed less charming, their faces frozen in perpetual smiles that now appeared sinister. I walked along the edge of the water, my eyes adjusting to the gloom. I scrutinized each doll, looking for signs of movement, for any indication that what I had seen earlier was more than just a figment of my imagination. The air was thick with tension, my senses heightened as I strained to catch any sound, any movement. Suddenly, a soft whisper reached my ears, a melodic hum that seemed to emanate from the shadows themselves. I turned sharply, my heart pounding, but saw nothing. The ride was empty, the dolls as still as mannequins. Yet the whisper persisted, growing louder, coalescing into the familiar tune of It's a Small World. The effect was chilling. The song that had once seemed so innocent now carrying an undercurrent of malevolence. As I turned a corner, I froze. One of the dolls, the same Dutch figure that had caught my attention earlier, lay on the floor, its limbs splayed awkwardly. Its eyes, unfocused and glassy, seemed to stare right at me. A surge of fear shot through me, but I forced myself to approach, to examine the doll more closely. As I knelt beside it, the air seemed to shift, a cold breeze sweeping through the room. I glanced up, my breath catching in my throat as I realized I was no longer alone. The dolls, once motionless on their tiny stages, had turned to face me, their eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that was both terrifying and magnetic. The whispering grew louder, the dolls' mouths moving in silent unison, their song now a haunting echo that reverberated through the chamber. I felt a pressure in my chest, a suffocating sense of dread that threatened to overwhelm me. Panic surged, urging me to flee, but my limbs refused to obey, held captive by the doll's unyielding gaze. In that moment, a realization struck me with the force of a sledgehammer. The dolls were not mere machines, not just clever contraptions designed to simulate life. They were alive, in some manner beyond my understanding, animated by a force that defied logic and reason, and they were aware, cognizant in a way that transcended their wooden exteriors. Desperation clawed at me, and I forced myself to break free from their gaze, stumbling backward as I sought the exit. The whispering followed me, a relentless tide of sound that pursued me through the winding corridors. I could feel their eyes on my back, an oppressive weight that threatened to crush me under its scrutiny. I burst through the exit, the cool night air a shock to my system, and didn't stop running until I was far from the ride, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I collapsed onto a bench, my mind reeling with what I had witnessed. The park around me was silent, indifferent to the terror that had unfurled within its borders. Returning to the hotel, I tried to process what had happened, to make sense of the inexplicable. I contemplated waking my wife, sharing the burden of my fear, but part of me recoiled from the idea. How could I explain what I had seen without sounding deranged? How could I convey the sinister air that had suffused the ride, the way the dolls had seemed to come alive in the dark? The next morning, the park was just as welcoming as it had been the day before. The previous night's events pushed to the recesses of my mind by the demands of family and the allure of new adventures. Yet, there was a lingering unease, a shadow that clung to me, a reminder of what lay hidden beneath the surface. We passed by It's a Small World again. My children's pleas to revisit the ride met with a forced smile and a hasty excuse about time constraints. I couldn't bear to go through it again, to face those watchful eyes and their silent song. As we continued our exploration of the park, the memory of that night haunted me, an indelible mark that no amount of daylight could erase. In the days that followed, I tried to dismiss it all as an overreaction, a consequence of fatigue and an overactive imagination. But deep down, I knew the truth. The dolls were more than just decorations, more than simple animatronics designed to entertain. They held a secret, a dark presence that eluded understanding, concealed behind their painted smiles and cheerful song. And as we left Disney World, returning to the normalcy of our everyday lives, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that somewhere, somehow, those eyes were still following me, a silent reminder that in this small world, not everything is as it seems. It was a trip well overdue, one that had lingered in the whispers of our plans for years, always set aside for some future occasion that never quite seemed to arrive. But then, one day in late autumn, with the leaves turning shades of amber and gold, we finally decided to go. The allure of Disney's Magic Kingdom called to us like a siren's song. My partner, Tom, was as excited as I was, this being his first visit to the fabled park. Weaving through the throngs of visitors, we were swept away by the kaleidoscope of colors and sounds that enveloped us. The air was filled with laughter, the sweet aroma of candied apples, and the anticipation of rides yet to experience. We navigated through the park with a map in hand, ticking off attractions with the enthusiasm of children. The roller coasters thrilled us, the parades delighted us, and the fireworks left us in awe. It was, by all accounts, a day of unblemished joy. As evening approached, we found ourselves standing in front of the entrance to It's a Small World, a ride I remembered fondly from my own childhood visits. The facade was a facade of whimsical architecture, a pastel-colored display of towers and turrets, all softly illuminated against the encroaching night. Tom was less enthusiastic, having heard it was a ride designed more for children, but I insisted. It was tradition, I told him, one of those experiences that encapsulated the spirit of Disney. Reluctantly, he agreed, and we joined the line, which, at this late hour, was mercifully short. As we boarded the small boat, I felt a wave of nostalgia wash over me. The mechanical voice instructed us to keep our hands inside, and with a gentle lurch, We were off, gliding into the darkness of the tunnel. The first few moments were filled with the familiar strains of the ride's theme song, a melody so cheery and repetitive it bordered on hypnotic. We drifted through scenes depicting children from various cultures, each more vibrant and enchanting than the last. The dolls sang and danced in unison, their movements synchronized to the music in a way that was both charming and slightly eerie, their glassy eyes reflecting the low light. It was as if time had ceased to exist in this miniature world of endless cheer. I pointed out details to Tom, my voice carrying over the persistent melody, reminiscing about how it was exactly as I remembered. He listened patiently, nodding along, but I could sense his growing impatience. Perhaps it was the song, its incessant refrain beginning to wear on him. As we rounded a corner, the transition between scenes was marked by a sudden, almost imperceptible change. The music continued, unbroken, yet the dolls seemed to be slightly out of sync, their movements more jerky and less fluid. I dismissed it as a glitch, something the operators would surely notice and fix. After all, hundreds of boats pass through here daily. But then, Tom nudged me, directing my attention to a pair of dolls near the edge of the platform. Their heads were tilted at unnatural angles, and their eyes seemed to be following us, not in the repetitive motion they'd been programmed for, but with an awareness that sent a ripple of unease through me. I shook my head, trying to dispel the creeping discomfort. It was just a trick of the light, an effect of the shadows. Yet, as we continued, the sense of being watched intensified. The dolls, all of them, seemed to have developed a subtle but undeniable sentience. Their eyes were no longer vacant, their smiles no longer benign. They were observing us, or at least, it felt that way. I glanced at Tom, expecting him to laugh it off, but his face was set in a serious line, his eyes scanning the scene with a growing wariness. We were nearly halfway through the ride when the first real disruption occurred. The lights flickered, dimming momentarily before returning with a harsher, colder edge. The music skipped, then resumed but slightly off key, as though the harmony had shifted into a minor chord. The doll's movements, already discordant, became even more erratic. One of them, a figure clad in the traditional garb of an alpine child, seemed to twitch violently, its arm jerking upward in a manner that was anything but mechanical. Tom whispered my name, a warning in his voice. He pointed to another group of dolls, their heads slowly turning in unison to track our boat's progress. It was no longer an illusion. Their eyes were fixed on us, following our every move. The ride seemed to be taking on a life of its own, guided by unseen hands. The boat continued its journey through different regions, each more unsettling than the last, the doll's behavior increasingly malevolent. In the African scene, a group of dolls began to sway, their eyes wide, expressions twisted into something resembling rage. In the Japanese section, a geisha doll's head snapped to the side, her painted smile a grotesque parody. Tom and I exchanged a look, a silent agreement passing between us. We needed to get off the ride. My heart pounded in my chest, the earlier joy of the day evaporating, replaced by an inexplicable dread. As if sensing our intent, the ride seemed to conspire against us. The boat's pace slowed, the water around us growing sluggish and thick. The music, still playing that cursed tune, slowed to a crawl, each note drawn out and warped. The dolls were no longer mere props in a themed attraction. They had become a legion of glassy-eyed sentinels, their presence oppressive and suffocating. Suddenly, the boat lurched to a stop. The abrupt silence was broken only by the water lapping against the sides. We were in the middle of a scene, surrounded by dolls from various cultures, their lifeless stares converging on us. The air was heavy, charged with an energy I couldn't understand. "Is anyone there?" I called out, my voice echoing in the stillness. No response came, only the haunting echo of my own words. Tom stood up, precariously balanced, as he looked around for some sign of the ride operators or emergency personnel. "This isn't right," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. I could see the tension in his posture, the realization that we were alone in this unnerving tableau. Before I could respond, the lights flickered again, plunging us into darkness. The boat shifted beneath us, and I felt a cold hand grip my arm. I gasped, jerking away, only to realize that it was Tom, reaching for reassurance. Our breaths were shallow, the shared fear palpable in the thick air. And then, as suddenly as the darkness had descended, the lights returned, but dimmer, casting long, sinister shadows that seemed to pulse with life. The dolls remained, but their expressions were now unmistakably hostile, their eyes glinting with something that felt disturbingly alive. In that moment, I understood. This was no malfunction, no mechanical failure. The dolls, animated by some malevolent force, were aware of us, and they did not intend to let us leave. The boat began to move again, but at an agonizingly slow pace. The ride song, once irritating, now felt like an incantation, binding us to this nightmarish procession. We passed through each scene, the dolls' presence looming like specters, their painted smiles now grimaces of malice. With each turn, each haunting verse of the song, it felt as though we were descending deeper into an abyss of horror, a world where the line between the inanimate and the animate had blurred. I clung to Tom, my mind racing with the frantic thought that we would never escape this tiny, dreadful world. Finally, as we neared the exit, the ride's pace quickened, the water flowing more freely. The dolls, as if sensing their imminent defeat, seemed to redouble their efforts, their movements a chaotic flurry of limbs and hollow stares. But we were moving too fast now, swept along by the current, the boundary between the ride's nightmare and the safety of the park growing thinner with each passing second. As we emerged into the cool night air, the spell seemed to lift. The oppressive atmosphere dissipated, the music fading into the distance behind us. We stumbled out of the boat, breathless and shaken, the night's earlier magic tarnished by the sinister experience. We walked in silence, the bustling noise of the park a welcome contrast to the eerie quiet of the ride. Tom squeezed my hand, an unspoken question lingering between us. Had it been real, or merely a shared hallucination brought on by exhaustion and overactive imaginations? Yet, as we left the park and headed back to our hotel, that question haunted me. The dolls, with their watchful eyes and unsettling smiles, seemed to linger in the corners of my vision, shadows that refused to fade. In the days that followed, I found myself unable to shake the feeling of being observed. At night, in the quiet of our room, I imagined hearing the faint strains of that infernal song, a reminder that the world we had glimpsed was perhaps not as small nor as contained as we once believed. Even now, as I write this, the memory remains vivid, an indelible mark upon my mind. The once innocent melody haunts my thoughts, a persistent reminder that behind every facade of joy, there may lurk a darkness waiting to reveal itself. And in moments of stillness, I wonder if, somewhere within the park, the dolls continue to watch, waiting for the next unsuspecting souls to enter their realm. The skies were remarkably blue, a canvas without a single cloud, as we strolled through the gates of the amusement park. It was my daughter Emma's 8th birthday, and she clutched my hand with eager anticipation, her eyes alight with the promise of a day filled with adventure. Disney parks hold a certain magic, a kind of enchantment that makes even the most cynical hearts feel a flutter of wonder. I felt it as we wandered through the bustling crowds, the air buzzing with the sounds of laughter and the sugary scent of cotton candy. This place was meant to be a utopia of joy, or so it seemed on the surface. Our path through the park was a winding one, dictated largely by Emma's whims, her voice a soft bell chiming with delight at every new sight. We navigated from one attraction to another, the world around us an explosion of colors and sounds. It was in this maze of enchantment that we eventually found ourselves at the entrance to the It's a Small World ride. The facade was a kaleidoscope of pastel hues, its clock tower charmingly whimsical as it chimed every quarter hour, the little wooden figures cheerfully parading in a mechanical dance. Emma tugged at my hand, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Daddy, can we go on this one? Please?" Her request was met with an indulgent smile, and soon we were seated in the small boat, the gentle current guiding us into the dim interior of the ride. The melody of the iconic song filled the air, sweet and repetitive, its lyrics echoing the theme of global unity. As we floated along, passing through various vignettes depicting children from around the world, I found myself lulled by the tune, my mind drifting to simpler thoughts. Each scene was a tableau of animated dolls, their movements mechanical yet oddly lifelike, limbs jerking in time to the music. They were clothed in traditional costumes, their painted smiles unwavering. The ride proceeded without incident, each turn revealing another picturesque scene, until we reached the section dedicated to Europe. The dolls here were clad in lederhosen and dirndls, kilts and berets, their expressions as fixed as before. I was watching them with mild interest when something caught my eye, a slight, almost imperceptible movement among the figures that didn't seem to belong. One of the dolls, a small girl with flaxen hair and bright blue eyes, appeared to turn her head slightly, her eyes following our boat as it passed by. I shook my head, convinced it was merely a trick of the light or the angle from which I viewed her. The ride continued, Emma's laughter and chatter a comforting background to my thoughts, but the sense of unease lingered, a faint whisper at the back of my mind. Days passed, the memory of the ride fading into the background of regular life. Yet, I couldn't entirely shake the odd feeling the doll had stirred in me. At first, it was easy to dismiss, a momentary glitch in the animatronics, perhaps. However, each night as I lay in bed, I found my thoughts wandering back to those unblinking eyes, the subtle shift of the head. One evening, as the shadows lengthened outside, I sat with Emma in her playroom. She was busy with her collection of dolls, arranging them in a tea party formation. I watched her in silence, the room filled with the muted colors of dusk. Her favorite doll was a small, delicate creation with blonde hair, much like the one from the ride. As I observed Emma's play, a chill ran through me, the memory of the ride resurfacing with vivid clarity. I tried to shake off the feeling, attributing it to fatigue or perhaps an overactive imagination. But then Emma paused, looking up at me with an expression that was both innocent and unsettling. Daddy, she looks just like the one from It's a Small World, doesn't she? She held the doll up, its blue eyes catching the fading light. I nodded, forcing a smile. Yes, she does. Maybe that's why you like her so much. I attempted to steer the conversation elsewhere, but Emma lingered on the subject, her child's fascination unwavering. That night, as I lay in bed, the sensation of being watched crept over me once more. It was absurd, I knew, an irrational fear spawned from a child's ride. Nonetheless, sleep came fitfully, plagued by dreams of dolls with watching eyes and silent, knowing smiles. As the week progressed, the feeling of unease only deepened. At work, I found myself distracted, my mind wandering back to that eerily lifelike doll. At home, I would catch glimpses of Emma's dolls, arranged in their little scenes, and feel the prickling of unseen eyes on my back. It was as if the boundary between reality and imagination had begun to blur, leaving me unsure of what was genuine and what was the product of my restless thoughts. One evening, driven by an inexplicable compulsion, I returned to the park alone. The night air was cool against my skin as I joined the stream of visitors making their way to various attractions. I felt a strange pull towards It's a Small World, as though the answers I sought lay somewhere within its innocuous depths. Once again, I found myself in the small boat, the familiar tune lulling me into a false sense of security as we passed through the ride. I watched the animated dolls with a new intensity, searching for any sign of movement beyond their programmed motions. As we approached the European section, my heart began to race, anticipating the sight of the flaxen-haired doll. When we drew near, I leaned forward, my eyes straining against the dim light. There she was, in her place among the other cheerful figures, her blue eyes bright and frozen in their painted expression. But as we passed, the head turned again, a soft creak audible above the music, the eyes meeting mine with an awareness that sent shivers down my spine. The ride concluded without further incident, but I left the park with a newfound sense of dread. Something was not right, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the doll's gaze had pierced some hidden veil of reality. Over the following days, the atmosphere at home grew tense. Emma's dolls seemed to take on a life of their own, their presence more palpable than before. I often found them in places they shouldn't be, their positions subtly altered as if they'd moved of their own accord. At first, I thought Emma was simply playing with them more often, But soon it became clear that something more sinister was at play. One night, as I passed by Emma's room, I heard her talking softly, her voice a hushed whisper in the dark. I paused by the door, listening intently. "No, you can't," she was saying, her tone firm. "Daddy wouldn't like it." There was a pause, as if she was listening to a response I couldn't hear. And then she added, "He doesn't understand yet, but he will." I felt a chill run through me, and I pushed the door open gently. Emma looked up, surprised but not afraid. "Who were you talking to, sweetheart?" I asked, keeping my voice light. She hesitated, her eyes darting to the dolls arranged around her bed. "Just my dolls, Daddy. Sometimes they say funny things." I forced a smile, tucking her into bed and kissing her forehead. "Well, it's time for them to sleep now, just like you. Good night, Emma." As I turned off the light and closed the door, a unease settled over me like a heavy cloak. That night, I lay awake, the darkness around me filled with imagined whispers and shadowy movements. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching, waiting, just beyond the edges of my perception. The dolls seemed to have taken on a presence that was neither benign nor imaginary, and I was caught in a web of fear I couldn't understand. The days continued in a haze of anxiety, each hour stretching longer than the last. The once innocuous dolls now held a sinister air, their eyes following me with a malevolent awareness. Emma, however, seemed unaffected, her demeanor as cheerful as ever. She would often talk to her dolls, her conversations more animated, her laughter brighter. Yet there was a distance between us, an unspoken understanding that she knew more than she let on. Finally, unable to bear the uncertainty any longer, I decided to confront my fears directly. One night, after Emma had fallen asleep, I crept into her room, my heart pounding in my chest. The dolls lay scattered across the floor, their expressions frozen in perpetual cheerfulness. I gathered them up, one by one, my hands trembling slightly as I carried them out of the room. I took them to the basement, intending to store them away from prying eyes and unsettling whispers. As I placed the last doll into a box, I felt a presence behind me, the air growing cold and oppressive. I turned slowly, half expecting to find some spectral form, but the basement was empty save for me and the dolls. And then I heard it, a soft, haunting voice, echoing faintly through the stillness. "It's a small world, after all." The familiar tune wrapped around me like a creeping fog, the melody warped and distorted, each note a whisper of impending dread. I stumbled back, fear clawing at my throat. The dolls lay silent, yet their presence was palpable, a sinister force lurking just beneath the surface. I fled the basement, slamming the door shut behind me, the song still echoing in my ears. The experience left me shaken, my mind a whirlwind of confusion and terror. I couldn't explain what had happened, nor could I deny the reality of what I'd heard. It was as if the ride had followed me home, its cheerful facade concealing a darkness I couldn't comprehend. In the ensuing days, I kept a close watch on Emma, wary of the influence the dolls might have over her. She seemed oblivious to my concerns, her interactions with her toys unchanged, her laughter still bright and untroubled. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that she was aware of more than she let on, her innocent facade concealing an understanding beyond her years. The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a prison, each room filled with unseen eyes and whispered secrets. I found myself drawn into a spiral of dread, the boundaries between reality and imagination blurring into incomprehensible shadows. And then, one night, the whispers returned, louder and more insistent. I awoke to the sound of the familiar tune, its lyrics twisted into a mockery of their original intent. "It's a small world, after all." The melody crept through the house, a haunting echo of the ride's sinister influence. Desperation drove me out of bed, my mind racing with fear and confusion. I followed the sound to Emma's room, the door ajar, the glow of her nightlight casting eerie shadows on the walls. Inside, I found her sitting upright in bed, her eyes wide and unblinking, fixed on the cluster of dolls arranged at her feet. "Emma?" I whispered, fear constricting my throat. She turned to me slowly, her expression calm yet unsettling. They wanted to sing for you, Daddy. They said it's time you understood. I felt a chill run through me, the room closing in with an oppressive weight. Understood what, sweetheart? She smiled, a knowing glint in her eyes. That is a small world, after all. The words hung in the air, their meaning elusive yet terrifying. I realized then that the ride, the dolls, and the song were all part of something much larger, a web of inexplicable connections that extended beyond the realm of ordinary understanding. In the days that followed, I tried to piece together the fragments of my experiences, searching for answers in the dark corners of my mind. The dolls remained hidden away in the basement, their presence a lingering shadow over our home. Emma continued to play, her laughter a bittersweet reminder of innocence lost to the influence of unseen forces. Even now, as I write these words, the song echoes faintly in my mind, an inescapable reminder of the horrors that lurk behind the cheerful facade of It's a Small World. The melody, once a symbol of unity and joy, now serves as a chilling testament to the darkness concealed within the most innocent of places. And so, I find myself trapped in a world where reality and imagination coexist, where the boundaries between light and shadow blur into unsettling ambiguity. It's a world where dolls watch with unblinking eyes, where whispers echo in the silence, and where the haunting melody of It's a Small World serves as a constant reminder of the terrors that lie just beyond the veil of normalcy.